Variations on Herb. At times, I hated my grandfather, Herb Lee, and could hardly wait for him to die. I'm not proud of this. I was perplexed when others called him great. At his funeral, when someone said, "It must be very hard to lose him, you must be very sad," I might have replied, "No, not hard, not sad, but strange." I had thought he was immortal. Here are the bare facts of mourning. This blue, this yellow, this white, this motley intervention of builded colors, squatting in the foreground as if to sniff the path of vision from the minded world. Far from the garden we are born, but the smell of the earth might stiffen our resolve to live within the flesh a while, accept the heart's unweeded stone, dance within its shadow like a flame, accept the mind as such a muscle to go flexing in the dark like wingless beetles in a high dish, accept this egginess of light that sticks to the world and makes its shapes involve us like breath across an open wound. The first time my mother Irene met Grandpa, he sized her up, grasped her hand in a firm grip, looked her square in the eye, and said, "How old are you and how much do you weigh?" She was 22. She weighed around 110 pounds. She didn't answer. After my mother was married to my father, she and her sister Dorothy were in the kitchen having coffee. My grandfather came out of the bathroom, stark naked, dripping wet, drying himself with a towel. He was in a mood for a conversation, I suppose. "Hello, Dorothy," he said, innocently rubbing his nakedness as if he were polishing brass. He was 80. He weighed around 190 pounds. Dorothy goggled into her coffee cup, choking a little as if she'd swallowed a fly. My mother often said we never had a home of our own. Once when she was getting ready for service, he asked her, "Why do you go to church?" pushing the question close with his face, examining her, watching her eyes. She did not reply, so he repeated the question. "Why do you go to church?" catechizing her while she fastened her Sunday hat on her hair. She turned and left in silence while the question came a third time, falling like an unspied sparrow behind her. There are some things you do not ask, a lesson my grandfather never learned. When his wife Stella died after 40 years of marriage, he said, "Is she gone then?" Spoke that simple grieflessness as if she had merely stepped out of the room for a moment. My mother took her passing hard and memorized his words like a curse. I was too young to remember my grandmother, though my mother said she was a good woman, and she told me often how he had used her. What my mother meant by used was that he had worked her like a draft horse till she died of diabetes at a goodly age. No one ever knew how he took her passing when he was alone. Once he spit over my mother's shoulder into the dishwasher water. She drained the sink. The spittle was the last thing to wash down. For a moment it swirled in the drain mouth like a dollop of hog fat. He used to piss off the back porch onto my mother's flower garden. The petals blanched and the leaves curled up and wilted like little flowers died. He would hike his zippers, savoring his small victory over women's ways. When he was young, my grandfather had black curly hair. "Nigger hair," his sister Mabel contemptuously called it. "I'll bury the old bastard," she said. All the strong women knew it was better to be born a sheep than a woman on the farm that had been in the family since the 1840s. Mabel was no exception. She'd moved to Toronto when she was young and near the end of her life dyed her hair blue. Once Grandpa said to her, "Mabel, why do your eyes look so wild?" "Man," she said, "you don't recognize beauty when you're looking at it." My grandfather, the shepherd, the cattleman, the gentleman farmer, loved and admired by his fellows, my grandfather and Mabel fought all their lives. "I'll bury the old bastard," she said with her sky blue hair and rouged cheeks. It seems the rivalry stemmed from the time he accused her of burning the old house down as a young woman. She smoked cigarettes, drank strong liquor, read important books, and was proud and bold as any man. She was a Lee, and as my mother often said, all the Lees are strange. Only Mabel stood up to Herb and put him in his place. She saw him real, she thought, no myth, but a reflection in a smoky mirror. She looked him in the eye and cursed his damn stubborn hide. I'll bury you, you old bastard. When Mabel died, she was cremated. Her blue hair, rouged cheeks, fine mind, and strong will all burned to ash, all dead and gone. After the burial service, my grandfather walked across the lawn to the gravestone, picked up the urn, shook the ashes next to his ear, and spoke. Mabel? Mabel? Are you in there, Mabel? He spoke solemnly, struck by an awful possibility. He listened, the urn next to his ear like a conch. There was no sound, either of sea or soul. The boy with the duck in his head. The boy is 5. He's running for the farmhouse with a duck on his head. The duck is flapping his wings, beating the boy's ears, hauling at his scalp like a storm shingle, hiking its nails. The boy is running, the duck on his head gyrating like a tin roof half torn off. The bill is drinking blood. The boy is running, his mad hands flashing like a feather plucker in the belly down. The duck cleated so the toe webs are stretched open and rubbery, adhering to the flesh below the hair. The boy is running for the farmhouse where his grandfather is at the gate, jacking the manure from his boots. First one, then the other. So the sheep dung is there on the jack blade, wickered with straw, dark green, Lincoln green, cud green, apple shit green, a high, sweet rose garden stink, instant and to be relished. The grandfather says nothing, with his eyes says, "Don't hurt that duck, boy." Says, "Ducks are money," with his eyes. Turns and he walks towards the house, and he leaves the boy with the duck on his head like a living hat. The first thing to change was his signature. The pen made an even more ragged trail, the name eventually disappearing into a scribble without strength, without sense. In the last year he had to be helped to his toilet. I can still feel his hand landing on my arm like a claw that hauled him up from his nest. Bird-boned, he leaned on that arm, shuffling across the room to where he bent and settled in a clatter on the seat. Then he'd strain, his waist coming dry like some large and jagged egg. "We're going to have to put you in the hospital, Herb," old Doc said to him when things got bad. "No, you're not," he said. "I want to die at home." On the last night of his life, he said to my father, "George, I'm starting to feel a little better. Could you ask Irene to make me a big breakfast?" My father took the tray of hot food into his room in the morning and found him there, cold. Later I heard my father's voice on the phone through the closed door. "Dad's gone," he said, in his tears. So be it. Despite it all, I miss him. When Em bathed his body after he died, she said, he didn't have a single bed sore. I think of her turning the soapy cloth in the folds of his unblemished flesh, a daughter's ablution, his cold heart, the strange stillness of his eyes. After the funeral, we went into the room and pulled out the drawers full of black and white photographs. We burned most of them. We did not know who the people in them were.